Hello and welcome back to part 2 of this tutorial on how to swap the CPU on your Mac Pro. As always, please take all the precautions necessary to make sure that you're not damaging any parts of your computer. So here we have the two heatsinks, and they're quite dirty with the old thermal paste, and this is where that Arctic Clean or some of that rubbing alcohol is going to come in handy. This is also where the Q-tips and the coffee filters are coming into play. The reason why I picked this up is because it provides a nice towelette that doesn't leave any residue behind. You could use some of those little things they use to clean glasses, but honestly the coffee filters will work just fine. So I say, hey, 80 cents for a full pack, why not? We're gonna start putting some of this Arctic Clean on the old thermal paste, and we're just gonna let it sit there for about a minute, and it's gonna dissolve the old thermal paste. And you can use the Q-tip, or you can use like the coffee filter and start kind of wiping that stuff off of it. We've done a few passes of Arctic Clean and a couple passes of Arctic Purifier. If you don't have any of this stuff, as I said, use rubbing alcohol. And as you can see, they're nice and clean and shiny. And now what we need to do is tinting the surface or prepping it. What we're going to do is we're going to put just a little dot of Arctic Silver right in the middle of these heat sinks. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use, once again, the handy dandy Panera Bread card. Man, this thing comes in handy way more than when I go there to get food. But anyway, we're gonna use it to spread this little bit of thermal paste around, up, down, left, right, and then diagonal, up, down, left, right. Try to cover the entire surface of the two heat sinks. We're gonna do it to one, and then we're gonna do it to the other. And then we're gonna take the coffee filter after we're done coating the entire surface, and we're just gonna wipe out any excess Arctic Silver that's filling in all the little microscopic gaps into the metal. Okay, so now that the heat sinks have been tinted, we want to do the same thing to the CPUs that we're going to put into the machine. If you got used CPUs from eBay, you might want to clean them with Arctic Clean and with the Arctic Purifier. You absolutely don't want any of the Arctic Silver to reach the bottom of the chip where all the pins are located. So be extra careful. Make sure your fingers are clean. Only grab it by the sides. Make sure you're still grounded to the chassis of the computer so that we're not accidentally shocking the chip with any static electricity. So once we finish putting a nice even coat on top, we want to take out our coffee filters and wipe out any of the excess paste out of there so that what you end up is a nice matte finish on top of the chip. And that's it. I think we're ready to install these puppies into the computer. So we're back into the motherboard, and we want to remove the old CPUs from the machine. There's one on top and one on the bottom, and this is done fairly easily. There's a little lever onto the side, and just kind of push it down, then move it slightly to the right and open up the enclosure of the chip, and you should be able to gently lift that chip out of the socket. Be extra careful that fingers are clean, that you're grounded, with the anti-static wrist pad, and that you're not contaminating any of the components in the computer with any of the thermal paste. You want to pay attention to this little arrow that's on the top right corner of the chip. This is going to help you orient the new chip into the same direction. There's also two little notches on the bottom that you can use to make sure that you put in the new CPU in right. But the arrow is a nice little indicator. So just remember, the arrow goes on the top right corner towards the rear of the computer. You want to gently lower the new CPU into the socket. Just make sure your fingers are clean and that you're not contaminating any of the surrounding parts. And just gently put it in there, and make sure that the orientation is correct so that the arrow is in the same position as the CPU that you removed. So if you feel that the CPU is nicely seated into the socket, we can slowly close the cage, and you're done with one CPU. With the first CPU successfully swapped, we want to do the same thing to the second one. Once again, we push down and pull the bar out to the right and lift it, and we open up the cage and gently lift the old CPU out, making a mental note of where the arrow was pointed. And we do a quick visual inspection of the socket, make sure that everything looks clean in there, and we gently lower the new CPU in there, making sure that it's oriented the same way with the arrow pointing in pointing in the same direction, and we also want to make sure that it's nice and properly seated into the socket, and we can close the cage and lock it down by pushing the bar down and latching it back. Before we put the heat sinks back on, we want to put some thermal paste to the top of the CPUs. Arctic Silver manufacturer recommends for these particular type of CPUs to draw a line down the middle of thermal paste about 1 millimeter wide all the way across, and that should cover the 4 cores that are directly underneath that metal surface. The manufacturer of Arctic Silver says it's more efficient than just simply putting up the thermal paste all over the top surface. Okay, so everything looks ready for us to lower the heat sinks back into place and tighten them back in. You also want to do a quick visual inspection of the bottom of the heat sink that's going to come into contact with the CPU, and once again make sure that it's nice and clean and free of any debris. That's it. I mean, we can start putting this machine back together. Once again, you want to remember to screw in this zigzaggy X pattern, so that you start from one side and then you move on to the opposite side, and then you start from the other side opposite of that, and then screw in the last final side opposite. And we're ready to put all the other components back together, or are we? Did we forget something? Yes, we did. We need to reconnect those little thermal sensors to the motherboard. Don't forget that one is on the left of the top heatsink, and the other one is actually at the very bottom of the computer that you can reach from the memory cage. Awesome. So now we're ready to put that little plastic divider back into the memory cage, and you know, slowly kind of slip it back in there. Once again, there's really only one way that this guy is going to go back in. Just be careful that you're not forcing anything, you're not bending anything, and you should be able to push it in until it latches onto the memory cage like the way it was before. So the next component to go back in is going to be the fan assembly at the front of the computer. There's a little notch at the bottom that should help you slide it in. Just gently lower it back in. Once it's in, press it a couple of times, make sure that that plug at the very bottom is making contact nice and tight in there. We can now take our long screwdriver with a Phillips head screw, that one screw that's holding the fan assembly in place onto the motherboard. Okay, so with the memory cage still loose, we should be able to slip back in the CPU cover. So make sure that everything is properly aligned. You should be able to kind of slip it back in and kind of shift things around so that they lock into place. So now we're going to tighten the screws in the memory cage back in, and this should be pretty straightforward. We want to use the short Phillips head screwdriver to tighten up the screws at the bottom of the cage, and we want to use the long Phillips head screwdriver to tighten up the ones at the rear of the memory cage. We can slide back our memory daughter boards so that they're nice and seated. Put the hard drives back in. Once again, this should be pretty straightforward and simple. Kind of slide them in and push them firmly when they reach the bottom to make sure that they're nice and plugged into the motherboard as well. And that's it. We put the cover back in, latch it back up, and ta-da! We're done. Hopefully we didn't screw anything up, and we're ready to turn on the computer and see the fruits of our labor in action. After you restart your computer, you might want to get your hands on a cool little app called Temperature Monitor, and this is going to tell you how hot the temperature of the cores are, and it's going to let you know if everything was reinstalled correctly, if the heat sinks are making full contact with the CPU, and most importantly, if the cores are running within the normal operating range. I wanted to run some before and after comparisons to see how much speed I gained. You can see here that the scores are really noticeably improved, and all the performance tests that I'm running show that the computer is almost twice as fast as it was before, which is great. I think this was a great upgrade and totally worth it. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions, just drop me a line here through YouTube, or you can go to my website, www.musicbycase.com, and click on the contact button, and I'll try to answer your questions if I can. Best of luck, and I hope your CPU swap is as successful as it was for me. Thanks.